Let us start with the first practice session. I welcome you all. Before we start with the question practice, just for today, I will like to give you a brief idea towards the exam, the AAA exam, and how you have to go about this exam. So, AAA is such an exam which is very easy in syllabus. I will never tell you that the syllabus of AAA is tough. Anybody and everyone can do it. But the thing which makes AAA challenging, the challenging component of AAA, is the application. Audit is such a thing, maybe which you have done in your any other professional course, or you have done it in your bachelor's, your graduation. So you have very good idea about audit. It's more like a theory subject where we have to kind of understand and sometimes mug up the things as well. But in this professional level of ACCA, the application skills matter a lot. And how can I get these application skills now? That is the main question. So, for that, you will have to practice the questions. Now, how to practice the questions? It's very easy to tell students that practice the questions a lot, and then the time remaining is less. Okay, so we tend to get stressed that how can we practice so many questions in less time. So practice has to be written, and because now the AAA exam is computer based, so you will have to practice it on the Word file or the Excel sheet, whichever is the case according to the question. So do practice it. At least 2 to 3 questions you have to do the written practice from every topic. 2 to 3 questions from every topic. You cannot skip this. I know you feel that you've mastered this audit subject. It's very handy, but they do. The examiner is going to stop you at 49 many times because this happens a lot in AAA. And I don't know, some of you are here who have given this exam before, but they were stuck at 45, 49, and now they're giving it again. So those guys can relate to it. Even though we have a lot of knowledge of audit, but then in the exam we feel confused. We feel the time pressure, especially in the first question. The reason is that we don't do the written practice. When you will be sitting in this session, I will be solving the question. You will feel really great to understand that question. You will feel that yes, you've got something, in one session. But there is no utility of that practice session unless and until you actually do the written practice for a similar kind of question yourself, right? So you have to make a plan accordingly. You can do at least, like, you can do 2 questions every day. You can do the brainstorming. If you cannot write the whole question, and that's fine, you can just do the brainstorming. So first read the question, then brainstorm your ideas that what could be the potential answer to this question. Then look at the back of your kit and see what are the actual key points mentioned. In your kit of BPP, every question has a marking scheme attached. So if you go to BPP kit, like for example, if I go to this first question, LARC company question, and when I will move towards the answer of this question at the back, I will find the marking scheme there, the key points there. So see how much of your ideas match with the ideas of the examiner. So you can say in the initial phase, even if 60% of it matches with the examiner, 60% of what you think is same as what examiner thinks, then you are going on a good track. It will improve with time, and I am serious about that. It does improve with time. So audit is such a subject, we feel like whatever we are thinking is right, but actually when we look at the back, that is wrong. So it will come with practice that you will be getting the judgment, professional judgment, because when I read the question, I feel this should be the answer, and there's no doubt I am totally right. This is the answer. But then I look at the back and the answer is totally opposite. So how can I turn the opposite to the right? That is with practice, by practicing my judgment, and it will improve with my practice with time. And you have to make a schedule accordingly. In class, we will be doing the important questions. We'll be doing the from every topic, we'll be doing 2 to 3 questions. So this time I'm going to give quality rather than quantity. Okay, so it's not that we are going to solve the whole kit. No, we are going to do qualitative questions so that even if we do one question in a class, you totally understand the concept of that question, right? So I assume that all of you have done your notes and you are done with the syllabus, especially the main areas like money laundering, the first part, the ethics, the audit risk will come a bit later. It's not here in the first few questions, so I'll let you know when we'll do the questions of audit risk. Then I hope you have done the group audit and the audit procedures and reporting. So based on that, now I will move on towards the format of this AAA exam. So for those of you who are giving it for the first time, there are 2 sections. Okay, and first question is for 50 marks, and this question is going to be either from audit risk, risk of material misstatement, and business, or you can say or business risk. Plus there will be some direct questions. So DQ stands for direct question for about 6 marks. So it is a general trend. It's not a guarantee, but it's a general trend which have been noticed in previous years. So audit risk and ROMM are 2 different things. Business risk is a different thing. So we will, throw light upon this once we do that topic, questions related to that topic. And then direct question for 6 marks. Now these are your 6 easy marks. So make sure you have the grip on those direct questions. So I'll give you a list of direct questions at a later stage. Like if you talk about money laundering, then how can we, or what are the steps which ACCA recommends to combat money laundering? So what are the ACCA's guidelines regarding that? That is a direct question. What is money laundering? What is professional skepticism? These are direct questions, so you should know the direct questions really well. You should know the definition, and what matters the most here is the keywords. Now these keywords are really very important. So as and when we'll do the questions, I'll let you know about the keywords. So make sure you use the keywords and don't tend to write too much. Do not write too much, because that is very hazardous. If I write stories in a question which is not related to the case study and which does not make sense, the examiner is following a set marking scheme. He does not care about what all uh, knowledge you have. He knows that you've studied audit, but he's not here to listen about the general knowledge. He just wants a specific answer which is specific to the case study. So stick to it, because already managing time in AAA is a very big problem, is a very big challenge. So we cannot write too much, and we have to write it to the point and make sure that what we write is at least 60 to 70% correct. Right? So this is about the question 1, where you will find the audit risk and ROMM and business risk for about 24 to 30 marks. Then you will have a direct question for 6 marks usually, and then you will also have some part of other topics, like you can have the audit evidence here, you can have the audit procedures here, you could be asked ethics as well. So the remaining marks belong to multiple areas, but these 2 areas are very much there, that is audit risk and the direct question. If I talk about the section B, that comprises of two more questions, which are 25 mark each. Now in this, the second question often relates to audit evidence. So it'll often relate to audit evidence. It can have a part of, you can say, the reporting as well. So audit evidence and reporting, both of them can be there in the second question. Then in the third question, you are going to get question from other assignments. That is something other than audit. Assignments like due diligence, assignments like where you are giving assurance, or where you are reviewing, or you are just giving some of your opinions on the prospective financial information, even the social audits. So something other than the audit of historic information. Those are other assignments which are there in your notes. So do refer to them. And it is in the last part of your notes. Those of you got the notes marked by me that, okay, these are the important areas. Then the last few chapters which I have marked important are from other assignments. So this is how your exam will look like. And today we are going to start with the first question of your kit, that is the LARC company question. So let us look into this question now. This is my kit, and this question relates to regulatory environment and professional and ethical considerations. So regulatory environment is basically the auditing standard for laws and regulation, the EPQ, ethics and professional and quality control issues. This is what they mean by ethical considerations. So how to write the answer, how to present it, and how to use a good wording for that. So let's read the first requirement of this question. This question is for 25 marks, and the first requirement says, discuss the implications of the circumstances described in the audit senior's note. Implications. So you have to read each and every word very carefully for the initial days. They're asking me to discuss. The implications are the effects. So if this thing happens, then what, or if this thing is happening, that what does it imply? What does it mean? What is it leading to? Right? So if we say that a person is having fever, what is the implication of that? We'll say that, okay, the risk is that he might have got the COVID-19. So this is the implication. So discuss the implications of the circumstances described in the audit senior's note. So I am supposed to discuss the implications of whatever audit senior is writing in his note. So whatever he has written, I have to draw a conclusion from that. I have to conclude that why is he saying so? What does that mean? Or what does that, you can say, implies? So if this thing is happening, what is the implication of that? Then the second part is explain the nature of any reporting that should take place by the audit senior. The first requirement is for 6 marks and the second one is for 3 marks. So when you see these 6 marks and 3 marks for such questions where, it's very general kind of a topic, it's not that it specifically relates to audit risk or something. We see that it is a general, they have not asked me audit risk, they've not asked me audit procedures, they've not asked me reporting, audit report, audit opinion stuff. So when I see such requirements, I can say that 6 mark means I have to write 6 relevant points, and each point will give me 1 mark. Now, 6 relevant point does not mean that you have to just write 6 pointers. 6 relevant point means maybe you are explaining 1 point in 2 pointers, or maybe 1 point in 3 pointers. That doesn't matter. Point Point is about the meaningful, you can say, conclusion which you have drawn. So if you say that the money laundering is happening, that is one opinion, or this is one conclusion which we have drawn from the audit senior note. Then the reason why I think money laundering is happening, that will justify my conclusion. So though that justification will give me 1 mark, right? So it doesn't mean that just 6 points, but 6 relevant points, 6 relevant ideas, 6 relevant conclusions. You might take 2 to 3 paragraphs to explain one conclusion, but that will give you 1 mark. Then let us read the case study for this requirement. You are a manager in Lark and Company, responsible for the audit of Huron Company, an owner-managed business which operates a chain of bars and restaurants. So I am a manager of Lark and Company. That means Lark and Company is the audit firm. So we have to recognize which is the audit firm and who is the audit client. Lark and Company is responsible for the audit of Huron Company. So that means he's the client, which is an owner-managed business which operates a chain of bars and restaurants. And this is your firm's first year auditing the client, and the audit for the year ended 31st March 2002 is underway. The audit senior sends a note for your attention. Now, when I see this thing that this is your firm's first year audit, many of us will feel tempted to write this point that if it is a first year audit, that means there is a risk, there is a detection risk, because this is the first year and we don't have enough knowledge about the client, so we can wrongfully apply our judgments. We don't know about the industry norms, etc. So this leads to increased detection risk, but we cannot write this point in this question. So I know you understand this thing that there is an increased detection risk. Examiner also knows that you understand this. That's the reason we are sitting this exam. But we are not supposed to write this in the exam, because many students have this temptation, as in when they see something which they know, they tend to write it there in the exam. But this is not a requirement. I'm not supposed to tell which is the audit risk, or what are the factors leading to the audit risk. So I will not write this point. I will stick to the implications of audit senior's note. So let us read the audit senior's note and brainstorm our ideas what we can write for what audit senior is saying here. So when I was auditing revenue, I noticed something strange. Huron Company's revenue, which is almost entirely cash based, is recognized at 5.5 million in the draft financial statements. So whenever you see this word cash based, this is a trigger point, a warning. Can anyone tell me which warning is this word for? Cash based?
Money laundering.
Right. So cash based is for money laundering. So whenever the business is entirely cash based, or some important transaction which didn't happen from the bank, because bank is a very safe thing, where you have to provide evidence, or where you have to tell to whom you are paying the money and from whom you're getting the money. But cash based is a risky transaction, so it is an indicator of money laundering, one of the very big indicators of money laundering. So revenue is 5.5 million. However, the accounting system shows that till receipts for cash paid by the customer amount only to 3.5 million. So till receipts are cash paid by the customer. So if you go to any shop, the money which you pay to the shopkeeper, which he keeps in his drawer, is a till receipt, which he got from the customer there and then. So that is a till receipt. So the till receipt which you got from the customer was only 3.5 million. Then how come they have recorded a revenue of 5.5 million? This is a very strange point. So if you brainstorm, what does it look like? It looks like money laundering is happening here, where 3.5 was a legitimate cash which we actually received from the customer, but we have topped it up with another 2 million because 3.5 million was in cash. I was already having cash in my drawer, and I kept illegal cash with the legal cash and mixed them up so that no one can doubt me. And then I showed that revenue was 5.5. So no one can doubt me now. Everyone thinks I made a revenue of 5.5, but there is a risk. Okay, you cannot pass strong statements that this is happening for sure. You have to say there is a suspicion, there is a risk. We just doubt it. So this seemed odd. So I questioned Eva Gull, the finance controller, about this. So the audit senior questioned the finance controller. She said that Jack Heron, the company's owner, deals with cash receipts and posts journals dealing with cash and revenue. So this is a very strange thing that the owner himself is posting the journal entries related to cash and revenue. Why don't they have a bookkeeper? Why don't they have some accountant there? Even in the presence of Eva Gull, the owner is the one who's doing this administrative work. That means the owner requires control. He wants sole control on the recording. So if you guys know from your previous studies, when we talk about segregation of duties, we always say the one who authorizes the transaction should not be the one who records the transaction. So authorization is from Jack and recording is also from Jack, the owner. So this is just adding up to the suspicion. This is the implication which I have drawn till now. So Eva asked Jack the reason for these journals, but he refused to give an explanation. This is again a trigger point. That now this person is not even giving me an explanation that why is he posting these journals. Then the audit senior says, while auditing cash, I noticed a payment of $2 million made by electronic transfer from company's bank account to an overseas financial institution. So if you just in general talk about money laundering, can anyone give me the exact definition of money laundering? What do we mean by money laundering, or what are the steps involved in money laundering? You can unmute your mic and tell me. Not exact, even a bit closely related.
Could we say is the way you pass illegal money and you mix it with real money?
Right, good. And what are the steps involved in it?
So the steps would be like you get an officer who would actually look into that.
No. It's the recommendation which you are talking about. But when a criminal is doing money laundering, then what are the steps he follow?
Oh, the placement, the
Right,
lane, and the placement, the lane, and there's a third one I can't remember now.
integration.
Integration, yeah.
Yeah, good. So Akshat has replied on chat, process by which criminal attempts to conceal true identity and origin of criminal proceeds and tries to give such proceeds legitimate cover. Yes, very good. That is exactly what we mean by money laundering. So how will we frame the answer, that I'll tell you later. But here I wanted to emphasize on placement, layering and integration. The PLI. Placement is when you place the illegitimate cash with the legitimate cash. So the day the owner of this business placed that illegitimate or illegal 2 million with this legal 3.5 million was the day of placement. So I can relate the steps involved in money laundering with this case study. Then what is layering? Layering is when you keep on sending the money from here to there, so that people cannot find the exact source from where the money is coming. First you will transfer that money to person A, then you will transfer it to person B, from B to C. So that way you are trying to hide the source. So that's what is happening here in this paragraph, where they say that 2 million made by electronic transfer from the company's bank account to an overseas financial institution. If you send something out of your country, you are sending the money from one finance, you can say financial system, to another financial system. So that way, that is also one of the ways of layering, where we are doing electronic transfer from one country to another country. Then the bank statement showed that the transfer was authorized by Jack, but no other documentation regarding the transfer was available, which is again very strange. Then, alarmed by the size of this transaction and the lack of evidence to support it, I questioned Jack Heron, asking him about the source of cash receipts and the reason for electronic transfer. He would not give any answers and became quite aggressive. So, when this person, the owner of this business, was asked about that 2 million, from where did that 2 million come, and why there was an electronic transfer, this person became aggressive, which is clearly depicting that he is doing something fishy. So he is hiding something, he's following some secrecy, and he's getting aggressive. That means he's doing something wrong, something illegal. So let us frame one answer out of it, and let's see, if this question came in the exam, what would I have written and how? Okay. This is our question number 1, Lark Company. And this is the first requirement, part A. Okay. So the first requirement talks about implications of audit senior's note. So I can write the first point. Now this is a raw answer. This is not exactly like I'll write a detailed answer. I will give you an idea about it, and then you can explain it further. So I will write the key points and the key words and the key idea. So the first thing is that the business, the revenue of Lark Company, or sorry, not Lark, who is our client? I think it's Lark. Okay, Heron Company. So the revenue of Heron Company is entirely cash based, which makes it a front business for money laundering. So basically, if you are having an add-on point, if the company's business is cash based, their revenue is cash based, so this is an add-on point for that company, because this is a facilitating factor. This will give them a front. Front is like in wars, they have some front where the actual movement is going on. If you talk about World War I or some other war, they always talk that the main activity, the principal activity was happening in this area. So that is the front of the wall, right? So similarly in money laundering, this nature of the business, that it is cash based, it makes it a front business for money laundering. So it is an appropriate facilitating factor that now, since I have my revenue coming in the form of cash, it gives me an edge, it gives me the facilitation to do money laundering, right? So here I can talk about money laundering. So we can write the definition of money laundering here. So as Akshat rightly stated, that money laundering is the process, it is a process, okay, by which the criminal, because this is a criminal offense, so anyone who's doing money laundering, he's termed as criminal. So money laundering is the process by which the criminal attempts to hide, or you can say conceal, the true origin and ownership of the illegal proceeds and by layering it by layering the illegal fund and providing it a legitimate cover. So this is basically the process by which we turn black money into the white money, right? So this is exactly what we can write for the definition of money laundering. So we can say, because there is a front business, so this is an indicator of money laundering, cash based revenue. Then we can talk about that the owner of the audit client, the owner of the audit client, Jack Heron, Jack could have, I am not passing a strong statement here, I'm just saying it's suspicious, it's not true, it could be, it's maybe or maybe not. So the owner of the audit client, Jack, could have possibly placed the illegal $2 million with the legal $3.5 million, so as to mix up the dirty and the clean money, which could be seen as the first stage of money laundering. This is my implication from the audit senior's note, right? One of the implications. Then third point, I can write that what was the another thing written in the case study? They have written that he is the one who has the sole control. So Jack Heron has the sole authority to conduct the transactions, or you can say the cash based transaction to be specific. So he has the sole authority to conduct the cash based transaction and pass the journals related to them. Which clearly depicts the lack of segregation of duties. So there is no segregation of duty here. So lack of segregation of duties, which is an indicator of fraud and an offense, and even an offense, criminal offense, like money laundering. Right? Then they are saying that if you see the case study again, first they told you that the revenue was cash based. We've written a point on that. Then they told you that he deals with the cash receipts and he passes the journals. And now the fact is that Eva is not giving, Jack is not giving the reason for this. Even you can make a point on that. So every line is giving me some point to write. So I can write here that the fact that Jack does not provide any explanation to the financial controller about the journals depicts that he is trying trying to hide something from others. So in other words, if you use some technical kind of words, professional kind of words, you can write that it is indicating secrecy, which adds to the suspicion of money laundering. Then fifth point, you can talk about layering here. First we talked about placement. Here we can talk about layering, the movement component of money laundering, where the money moves from one account to another account, from one account to another account, so that we can hide the source. So the electronic transfer of a material amount, of a very material amount, it's material by size, material amount of $2 million to an overseas financial institution without any explanation and documentation available, without any explanation, because the owner didn't give any explanation, and then there was no documentation also. When audit senior tried to find the documentation, he was not able to find it. So this electronic transfer from one country to another country without any explanation and documentation indicates the second stage of money laundering, that is layering, where the owner of the client could be trying to hide the source, the original source of the illegal proceeds of $2 million, right? And then we can also, this is the last point, we can write more points also, because there are a lot of ideas here in the case study, right? So if you see the second last paragraph, there was no documentation, we have written a point on it. Then there was lack of evidence, and he became quite aggressive. So let's write a point on this. We could have written this layering point separately, and the fact there was no evidence, we could have written it separately. We would have got 2 marks here. But since we were not lacking any idea, so I merged these 2 points. So that will give me now 1 mark. So, alarmed by the size of this transaction, the lack of evidence to support it, I questioned Jack about the source and the reason for electronic transfer. He would not give any answers and became quite aggressive. Now, you can emphasize a lot about this fact, that the fact that Jack, instead of giving a satisfactory answer to the client, or sorry, answer to the auditor, gave a very vague explanation, and above all became aggressive with the senior, which indicates that he could possibly be fearing of being caught red-handed. So this is sixth point, and all of these points are giving me 1 mark each. So that means how many marks I've got till now? I've got 6 marks. So now let us look into the answer for this very question. This is the first question. So I would like to show you the answer, just the marking scheme for it. So let me see the page number where the answer is. One zero seven. Yeah. See, this is the marking scheme I was talking about, which you have to see when you brainstorm the idea for any question, because we cannot write answers to the 70 questions of the kit. So first you have to write about definition of money laundering, then placement, then owner posting transactions. We wrote about that, lack of segregation of duty, then layering, electronic transfer to overseas, secrecy and aggressive attitude, then audit to be considered very high risk. This point is like, why high risk? Because when the client is involved in such potentially criminal activities, then it becomes a risk for the auditor as well, because it will harm his reputation. So this is a very indirect kind of point which you may not write. Then senior may have tipped off and firm may consider withdrawal from audit, but this may have tipping off consequences. So we found our 6 points in the first part only, then that was the reason we didn't write these points. So what are these points exactly? Senior may have tipped off. So the day when the senior asked this client Jack about the explanation of for that electronic transfer, that was the day he might have tipped off. Can anyone tell me the meaning of tipping off? Those of you who've done the notes, what do we exactly mean by tipping off in indirect words maybe?
Is it when you tell the client, you kind of like let him know that you know his secrets?
Right, exactly. And Sharon was also given a right answer, hinting. So it is a crime in itself. So if someone is trying to steal something, and then you tell him that I'm going to tell the police about you stealing this thing. So you are tipping it off. You have to be clever enough to let that person steal, and meanwhile you have to call the police, and don't let that person know that you have a doubt on him. So don't let the client know, right, Akshat? So that is tipping off. So when the senior asked the client that what was the reason for that electronic transfer, that means now the client knows that the auditor has a doubt on him. Now what he will do is he will try to hide all the evidences available to uh, prove that he is a criminal. So he will destroy every evidence which could prove him a criminal, because now he is warned. He's warned by the auditor, that too unintentionally. That is tipping off, right? So let us write about the second requirement now. Explain the nature of any reporting that you will do, uh, that should take place by the audit senior. So can you just tell me some of the ideas for this requirement? What do you think kind of reporting audit senior should do?
Sorry, when you say reporting, what do you mean by that?
Reporting is not audit reporting, but it's about to whom to report, to whom to tell if this thing is happening, if the potential money laundering is happening.
He might tell the government. He might tell the
Okay,
tax, and then he might have to get in an officer who would have to look into it.
right. So,
Uh,
what is the exact term? This was a general answer.
Sorry.
What exact term can we use here for the officer?
Oh, the money laundering, is it review officer?
Money laundering reporting officer, MLRO.
Reporting officer. Yeah.
Right. Very good. So, we are going to report to the MLRO, right? So we have to report the suspicions immediately. We have to report the suspicions immediately to the money laundering officer. So let's write the answer to our second requirement. Report immediately to the MLRO. Now, guys, when you have to write about this MLRO, this is a direct question. So make sure you know about certain keywords. Who is an MLRO? MLRO is a senior person. Okay, he is a senior person, because a junior person cannot handle this position where everyone is reporting to him. So he is a senior person. Yes, right, Akshat. So he's a senior independent partner, senior and independent. And what is his work? He receives, evaluates, and passes on. So he does three works. First, he will receive the suspicion report. If anybody in the office will find any suspicion on anyone relating to money laundering, that person will go to this MLRO. This MLRO will receive that report. He will evaluate, he will assess that really is there any evidence that money laundering is there. So he will just, evaluate the things, and then he will pass it on to the relevant authority, because MLRO is not a police officer. He cannot take the action. He can just, report it to the relevant authority, which is the enforcement agency. We call it as enforcement agency. So he will pass it on to the enforcement agency. So you have to write these keywords. They should be there in your answer. And then we will write that if the person does not, if you have a suspicion. So if you suppose you have a suspicion on one of your colleagues that he's involved in money laundering, if you do not report on timely basis, if the suspicion is not reported timely to the relevant authority, when you don't know who's the person or who's the officer, just write relevant authority. So if the suspicion is not reported timely to the relevant authority, then it is itself an offense. So if you see the crime happening and you do not report it to the relevant person, then you are yourself a criminal. So this is what they mean, that if the auditor was having a suspicion and then he takes no action against it, then he is himself an offender. He is himself a criminal. Then we will have to write the matters to be reported. So if you talk about the matters, if the audit senior needs to report this to the MLRO, what all will he report? He will report the identity of the suspect. Who's the suspect? The owner is the suspect. The owner is Jack Heron. He is the suspect, so identity. The circumstances which led to the suspicion, which led to the suspicion, right? And then the you can say the address, the details of the transactions which are subject to suspicion, or any other partner involved, details of that person. So that is all which will go into the report, right? Then audit senior may discuss the matters with the audit manager, but senior responsible for the report. So the audit senior is the one who is finding suspicions. Okay, he is the one who found the cash based business. He's the one who found that 2 million of the electronic transfer. So he is responsible. Audit senior is responsible for reporting the suspicion to the relevant authority So he is responsible for reporting the suspicion to the relevant authority, but he might discuss it with the audit manager, which is the student in this question. So in this question, they've told you that you are the audit manager. So audit senior might discuss stuff with you, but he is primarily responsible for reporting the suspicion and not you. Right? So this ends your first and the second requirement. Any doubts up till here from these two parts? Is this clear to everyone? Okay.
Tashwita, can you please raise it so that scroll up so that we can see the beats, the last beats that you've written?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you see it now?
Yes. Then after the matters, the audit senior.
This one?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's move towards the next question or next requirement, which is about professional skepticism. And it is for again 6 marks. So in relation to the audit of Coot Company's payroll, now this Coot Companies are another client. So I am the audit manager of Lark Company, and this Coot Company is my second client, which I am talking about in the same question. So in relation to the audit of Coot Company's payroll, explain the meaning of the term professional skepticism and recommend any further actions that should be taken by the auditor. So professional skepticism here will give you a lot of marks. So you have to explain the meaning. You're not just supposed to give the meaning, but you're supposed to explain the meaning. And then you have to recommend any further actions that should be taken by the auditor. So we can split the mark between the professional skepticism meaning, maybe for 3 marks, based on what we write. If you write one line, then obviously you will not get 3 marks for that one line. So you have to explain it quite comprehensively, which will give you 3 marks. And then the further actions will give you another 3 marks. So further actions is a very general term which is used in this AAA. Further actions depend on the stage which you are at today. Are you at the planning stage? Are you at the evidence stage? Or are you at the reporting stage? Based on the stage, our further actions will be devised. So if we are at the planning stage, then maybe if this is a risky area, then related to these, there may be some more risky areas. That is my further action. So I will have to do substantive testing related to that another risky area which I identified. Right. But if I am at the evidence collecting stage, I am already done with the planning, then writing that you will go back and do the planning again is irrelevant. You can just say that now I will have to perform the work on that XYZ area, because if payroll is wrong, that means this thing could also be wrong. So I will have to work, or I will have to perform more work. So in audit, when you will be done with the audit evidence part, you will realize how to devise the audit procedures. That is, first write the verb and then write why you are doing that work. So we will talk about it when those requirements will come. Right? So let us read this paragraph here. You are also responsible for the audit of Coot Company, and you are currently reviewing the working papers of the audit for the year ended 28th February 2002. In the working papers dealing with payroll, the audit junior has commented as follows. Several new employees have been added to the company. So in working papers dealing with payroll, the audit junior here has commented the following things, where he's saying that during the year, many new employees have been added with combined payments of $125,000 being made to them. There does not appear to be any authorization for these additions. So when any company employs new people, there has to be an authorization. So even when we are employed by any firm, they do give us a proper offer letter which is signed by the director, and then they sign a contract with us, and then when we get our salaries, that too is authorized, right? But here they are saying these new people which were kept in the firm, there was no authorization provided for these people. And when I questioned the payroll supervisor, when the audit junior questioned the payroll supervisor who made the amendments, she said that no authorization was needed because the new employees are only working for the company on a temporary basis. Okay, that's justifiable, that okay, because they are working for temporary basis, so the payroll manager did not find it important enough to get the authorization from the director. However, when discussing staffing levels with the management, it was stated that no new employees have been taken on this year. Other than the test of controls planned, no other audit work has been performed. So we have not, we are just on the test of controls stage, We've not done any work. We've passed the planning stage. Now we are testing the internal controls. So we are basically on the third stage where we will have to start with the audit work, right? So this whole paragraph is sounding really fishy because the payroll manager is saying that new people were kept, but the management is saying no person was kept. Then there is no authorization, and a payment of this much was being made, which seems to be a very material amount, right? It's not in hundreds or in thousands. It's in 1,25,000, which seems to be a material amount. So there is a risk, or there is a indication that this payroll supervisor is committing a fraud. Because if the management would have been committing this fraud, then management would have said that yes, we did keep the employees. Maybe in actual they didn't keep any employees. So there is a indication that this payroll supervisor is showing ghost employees. Now, ghost employees are basically the bogus employees who are just there in the documents but do not actually exist. So they just get the salaries in the documents. So as to show that, oh, we have a lot of expense. So if you show an expense, you get a tax benefit, tax deduction, right? So they're just showing a ghost employee so as to gain that benefit, right? So let us frame our answer now. The second part. So let's first write about professional skepticism. Can anyone tell me, enlighten me upon professional skepticism? Direct question. Questioning mind. Yes. What else? What is it? Is it a process? Is it a nature? Is it an item?
It's a process.
Process. Okay. It's not a process. It's basically an attitude. It's a trait. So if I tell, okay, so you are very conscious. So now being conscious, you are not doing something, you're not having a process going on, you are not having any production and manufacturing or any stuff going on. There's no stage to it. There's no step to it. Process is something which has stages and steps. But this professional skepticism is a trait, it is an attitude, a trait of a person. It is a part of the nature. So it is an attitude of a questioning mind. So as Akshat stated, and Gayatri and Sharon, you also, it is an attitude of questioning mind. Being alert to the situation. So these are the keywords which I'm writing. Being alert to the situations which possibly, depict some contradictory evidence. Being alert to the contradictory evidence. So suppose, what is an example of contradictory evidence? As it is there in this question itself. One person, one party, the payroll supervisor is saying new people, new employees were kept during the year. Whereas the management is saying no person was kept during this year. So this is a contradictory evidence. As an auditor, I'm supposed to get sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. But here I am getting statements from two people which vary. So this is being alert. You can't just simply ask the client that is there any fraud? He says no, there is no fraud. That's not a questioning mind. You have to challenge that person. You have to challenge that person by your attitude. So you are being alert to the contradictory evidence and any unusual event. So if something very fishy is happening, so you have to keep alertness towards that thing. So you have to be having a questioning mind for unusual event, for any fraud indicator, right? So that is what we mean by professional skepticism. Now you can explain this thing further, saying that it is an attitude of keeping a questioning mind will give you 1 mark, and then explaining that it is being alert to these things, then explaining it further. I've just written a raw thing. You can read it from the kit afterwards. So you can just explain it in general terms, like if I am alert to contradictory evidence, you can give an example of contradictory evidence, an unusual event, and fraud indicator. So these are the things which you have to explain, and you will get the 2 marks here. And in total, for professional skepticism, you will get here 3 marks. Right? Then let's be specific to the case study, that is the application of our concept. They asked me about the, further procedures which, the auditor has to conduct in this situation where payroll supervisor is saying one thing and management is saying another thing. So what can I write here? Let's discuss about that. Further actions. We'll say that the evidence which we currently have, the evidence which exists currently is not sufficient. Then why is it not sufficient? We can't just pass a statement casually. We'll have to explain why. Because it is contradictory. Because it is contradictory, where the payroll supervisor claims that new employees were kept during the year and this management says that no new employee was kept. Fuel adding factor is that there was no authorization. There was no authorization for the payment of $125,000 to these so-called temporary employees. Right? So this evidence which we have currently is not sufficient because it is contradictory. So we need, not we cannot use the words we, sorry for that. So you have to use professional words. So the auditor needs to gather further additional evidence regarding this issue or regarding this item of, or regarding this transaction of 125,000. Right? So if there is, no authorization, this no authorization, it depicts that there is a deficiency in internal control. So if you're not getting any authorization for the payment, that means your internal controls are weak, and this point must be reported to the management. So no authorization. What is your further action? No authorization, you will say conclude it. It is a deficiency in internal control, because we are in the testing stage right now, control testing stage. So it is deficiency in internal control. So we need to report this to the management or report this to those charged with governance, right? Then you can say that this contradiction, this indicates, contradiction indicates a fraud being committed by the payroll supervisor where ghost employees or bogus employees are being created to misappropriate the assets, misappropriate the assets, or even maybe to launder the money. So maybe you are misappropriating your cash, or you're just, you can say, stealing the 125,000, or you are laundering that money. You're using it for illegal purposes. So this contradiction can lead to that. So this is an indicator, and you have to report it to the relevant authority in that case. So report it to relevant authority in that case. That is your action towards it. And since it was being found by the audit junior, then we'll say that the audit junior needs to be aware, or you can say alert to such conditions, and report them or discuss them with the senior. So this is the second part of a question. So this what I have written will give me more than 3 marks. So I have written enough, more than enough, right? So this ends our even the second part. So we are getting 6 marks here from this requirement as well. So if you realize this thing, it does not matter actually that whether you understand the requirement fully or not, because what case they are giving you in the case study, what circumstances they are giving you in the case study, even if you don't understand this line, this thing, let's suppose if you don't understand this thing, but you understand this whole paragraph, so it is giving you a very good idea about what the examiner want from you. So here, while reading this, I can clearly see that there is a contradiction of evidence. So as an auditor, what should I do? It is common sense that because we need sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and here we are not getting the same, so we need to do further work. We need to report. If this is a fraud, we are supposed to report it to relevant authority. And if it is done by the audit junior, as stated here, that audit junior is the one who's doing this, or who's finding such things, so he's supposed to talk or discuss it with his senior. He cannot he cannot just do it or do everything on his behalf, and he should also take care that he does not tip off in front of the payroll supervisor. So now we have the last requirement of this question, which basically relates to group accounts and audit reporting. So, and this is for 10 marks. So before I start with it, I need to get answers from you, that have you guys done the group audit and audit report, the audit types of audit opinion and stuff? Have you guys done that part of syllabus? Okay, Kruti has not done. Akshit has also not done. What about others? No. Okay. Okay. So most of you have not done this part. So I will just give you a very brief idea about this requirement. We are still left with 15 minutes. Okay. And then what you can do is you can just circle this requirement. And once you're done with the syllabus area which it relates to, then you can come back to this and read it again and maybe see the answer again. So I will just give you a very brief idea about what they are talking about in this 10 marker question. So let us read the requirement first. Here they are asking me identify and explain the matters that should be considered and actions that should be taken by the group audit engagement team in forming an opinion on the consolidated financial statements. So those of you who are following the notes, there is a separate, you know, topic which is group audit, which is very important from the perspective of P7, because the first question usually comes under the framework of group audit, where there is a group, where there is a consolidation, where there is a parent and a subsidiary, and then you are auditing either a subsidiary or both the parent and the subsidiary or just the parent. So that is basically group audit. So there is a concept of significant component there. There is a concept of audit procedures on intra-group transactions. So how to make sure that intra-group transactions have been eliminated. So that syllabus area is very important. So do go through it before the next class or any time where whenever you get the time to go through it. So do go through it because it is very important from the perspective of P7. So here they are asking me to identify first of all and then explain the matters that should be considered and actions that should be taken by the group audit engagement team. What actions they should take while forming an opinion. That is the ultimate objective of the audit. To give an audit opinion is the objective of the audit. So, what all actions the auditor should take while forming an opinion? That means what all procedures he should conduct. So, let us read it. You are a manager responsible for the audit of Nassau Group. So group means there is a parent and few subsidiaries, which comprises a parent company and 6 subsidiaries. The audit of all individual companies' financial statements is almost complete. So as we know that in business combination IFRS 3, we say that we are supposed to prepare the group accounts because of economic substance over legal form. Legally, every entity is separate. So if WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook are in a group, WhatsApp is a different company legally, Instagram is a different company, Facebook is a different company. But for the economic purposes, they all are part of a family, they are all a part of a group. So, as a shareholder of WhatsApp, I would like to know what is the income or the loss of the members of the group. So, if WhatsApp is a subsidiary of Facebook, so I need to know as a shareholder of WhatsApp that what is the parent doing, because parents' earning will obviously affect the earnings of the group. So for economic substance, I'm supposed to prepare financial statements. So here they are telling that individually for every parent, for every subsidiary, the audit is being done already. You are supposed to audit the consolidated financial statements. So you are currently carrying out the audit of the consolidated financial statements. One of the subsidiaries, Exuma Company, is audited by another firm. Your firm has fulfilled the necessary requirements of ISA 600 and is satisfied as to the competence and independence of Jalhousie. So you are basically, what does ISA 600 tells you? That how to rely on the work of the component auditor. So component auditor is, what is a component? Component is the subsidiary. So if the subsidiary's auditor is different from the original audit firm, that is the audit firm of the group, then we call it as component auditor, right? And here we have already satisfied, we are already happy that that auditor, component auditor, is competent. Okay, he is having relevant knowledge, training, and experience, KTE, knowledge, training, and experience, and he is independent according to code of ethics. There is no self-interest, there is no self-review, no advocacy, no this intimidation, and no management threat. You have received from Jalhousie, the component auditor, the draft auditor's report on Exuma Company's financial statement, an extract from which is shown below. So we have received Exuma's draft auditor's report, where he is giving a qualified opinion. So the component auditor is giving a qualified opinion to the subsidiary. He's saying that in our opinion, except for effects of the matter described in the basis for qualified opinion, the financial statements give a true and fair view. So those of you who have not done the reporting part yet, it might be difficult for you to understand that what is a qualified opinion. So qualified opinion is where, you know, you're saying except for one thing, everything is correct. So one thing is wrong. So you're saying except for. So that means there is a material misstatement, but it is not pervasive. Pervasiveness is when it is spread in the whole financial statements, or it is fundamental to the user's understanding. That you will do in the reporting part in your notes. So that is what we mean by qualified opinion, right? Then what is the matter which led the subsidiaries auditor give a qualified opinion? What is the misstatement here? What is the mistake here which is done by the management and they are not ready to correct it? So there they have explained that misstatement. The company is facing financial damages of $2 million in respect of an ongoing court case, more fully explained in note 12 to the financial statements. Management has not recognized a provision but has disclosed the situation as a contingent liability. So this thing relates to IS 37, which you have done in your fundamental exams as well, provisions and contingent liabilities and contingent assets. So what they're saying here, that company was facing a damage of 2 million due to an ongoing court case, and management has not recognized a provision but has disclosed it as a contingent liability. So when we say that it is probable, okay, there are three words: probable. Under IS 37, we have three words: probable, possible, and remote. So if the chances of us paying the financial damages, that means the chances of us losing the court case, are remote, that means it is from 0 to say 10% or 20%. If the chances are 0 to 10%, we say it is remote. But if it is from 10 to 50%, we say it is possible. But if it is more than 50%, we say it is probable. So when it is possible that you may lose the case and you will have to pay 2 million as a fine or financial damage, then we are supposed to create a contingent liability. But when we say it is probable, then we are not just supposed to we are not just supposed to create the contingent liability, that is just by disclosing and not actually recording any liability, but just giving a note. That happens in the case of possible. But in case of probable, we are supposed to create a provision, a liability, an actual liability, right? So here they have created a contingent liability and not a provision. So that means the management thinks that the chances are possible and not probable. So under IFRS, a provision should be made if there is an obligation as a result of a past event, a probable outflow of economic benefit, and a reliable estimate can be made. Audit evidence concludes that these criteria have been met, and it is our opinion that a provision of 2 million should be recognized. That means the auditor has done his work. He has talked to the lawyers, he has assessed the probability, he has got some auditor expert or something, and he have concluded, the auditor of the subsidiary, the component auditor, he said that the provision should be created, but the management is not ready to do that. The management is saying we will just disclose it as a contingent liability. So this is a misstatement. That's the reason the component auditor has given a qualified opinion. Accordingly, net profit and shareholders' equity would have been reduced by 2 million if the provision had been recognized. So they are just telling that due to this misstatement, what is the effect on other accounts? So the effect is on profit and shareholders' equity. Then note 12, the company is subject of a court case concerning an alleged breach of planning regulations. So now they're explaining that court case here in detail. So they have allegedly breached the planning regulations, the client. The plaintiff is claiming compensation of 2 million. The management of Exuma company, after seeking legal advice, believe that there is only a 20% chance of a successful claim being made against the company. So according to the management, there is just 20%. So it's just possible, not probable. So figures extracted from the draft financial statements are given. Why they have given you these figures of the group as well as of the individual statements? To calculate the materiality, right? So they have given us these information, these profit before tax and total assets. Yes, right, Sharon, to calculate the materiality. So I will see what is the materiality of this 2 million in relation to the individual financial statements and with the group. So before I answer this question, I will first look whether this subsidiary is a significant component or not, whether in the whole group this subsidiary is even important or not. If it is not important, then I don't care about it. But let's see what is the benchmark. The benchmark is 15%. So is 4 million at least 15% of 20 million? 4 divided by 20 into 100. What is that? 20%. So it is more than 15%. That means the Exuma company is a significant component. So I need to get sufficient and appropriate audit evidence regarding the Exuma company. I cannot just rely on the component auditor, right? So I will write that this is a significant component. I will have to get the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, point number 1. Then I can write about the, you can say the misstatement here. What is the misstatement? The misstatement is about IS 37. So as a group auditor, I will see what is the work performed by the subsidiaries auditor, the component auditor. I will assess if that work is correct or not. And if I find that work is not sufficient, then I may ask the subsidiaries auditor to conduct further work. I can ask him to maybe get some evidence in form of third party confirmation to talk to the lawyers, or maybe, uh, get a written representation or something from the management. I will need to know why the subsidiaries auditor think that a provision should be created and not a contingent liability. So now I'm directly related to the subsidiary because this is a significant component. Then after assessing all the evidences which we will gather after the further work, there are few options available to us. That is, if you think that this provision thing is right, that means the subsidiaries auditor is right, a provision should be created and not a contingent liability, then you will give a qualified opinion in the group financial statements as well. And then you will give a qualified opinion in the individual financial statement. So you have two choices, either just to give a qualified opinion in individual financial statements and not give it in the consolidated, or give it in both of them. So if we will just go through this answer on page number 150. So first they have calculated the materiality to the group. As I said, it is 20%, so it is a significant component. Then they are saying materiality of the issue. They calculated the materiality of this 2 million. So it is material to the group. If we compare 2 million to the group profit before tax and the group total assets, so it is material to the group, and it is material to the individual financial statements of Exuma as well. So it is material to both of them. Then the qualified opinion, here they have just explained the concept of IAS 37 and the reason why this opinion is being given. So they have stated that this misstatement is material, but it is not pervasive because it is not spread in the financial statements. It's just one item of the financial statements, and also it is not fundamental to the user's understanding. So we need to get sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Now the main point is to talk about the audit evidence, where you will say we have few options. That first we will have to review the component auditor's evidence, what he thinks and why he thinks that. Then we will assess the probability of the court case. We can get third party confirmations for that. We can get written confirmation from a lawyer, what he thinks about the probability. We can get written representations from the Exuma's management, the subsidiaries management. And depending on the strength of this evidence, it may have been appropriate for subsidiaries auditor to have used an auditor's expert to provide a separate legal opinion. So even if you get a third party confirmation and still you are not very sure about the evidence, then you can hire an auditor's expert. He is a person who is, having an expert area regarding these cases, and it is appointed from behalf of the auditor. So he's an auditor's expert who can give his separate legal opinion. He can view the files of the case and then give his own opinion that what are the chances, will you win the case or will you lose the case, right? Then further evidence, what is the further evidence which we can gather? We will see whether what we have gathered in the first paragraph here, is it strengthful or not? If it is not, then we can get any collaborative evidence, any additional evidence. So it is possible that there is no sufficient evidence available on this matter, and that Exuma's management is correct. In this case, Jalauzi would have to redraft its auditor's report. In case if what if the management is correct? What if actually you were supposed to create a contingent liability? Then now you will give an unmodified opinion. You will say everything is true and fair, there is no mistake. So you have to take into account all the probabilities. Basically, you are doing here scenario planning. You are taking into account all the situations and the probabilities that if this happens, then the subsidiaries auditor will have to uh, change the opinion. If it is just material to the, you can say the audit, the subsidiary, then just the subsidiary's audit opinion will be molded. If it is material to the group, then the whole group's audit opinion will be molded. But before that, you can also write this point that the group auditor should talk to the management of the subsidiary and ask them to amend their mistake so that the group audit opinion is not being modified. So this question is now part of your homework, this part. Okay, you have to uh, first do the group audit syllabus area, then the reporting syllabus area, and then you have to read this question. This part of this requirement of this question again. Plus you have to do some few other questions. So let's see what all questions you can do after this. This is just my recommendation. It's up to you if you solve it or not. So you can do this plant company question. Okay, plant company question we will do in the class. This is not related to what we did today. This is related to ethics, so we will do it in the class next time. You can do the speeches question. You can do fourth question, fifth question, and the sixth one. Fourth, fifth, and sixth one. So we'll do the plant company question in the next class. So before we end this session, you can ask your doubts for another 2 minutes, maybe, if there are any doubts. What if the management refused to correct the misstatement? What will be the implication? Yes, so Khalid, if the management is not, correcting their mistake, then you will have to modify the audit report. Because that is the last resort, right? If they do not, we just give them a last warning that please do amend it, else we will modify the report and that will affect your reputation in front of the shareholders. So even if then they do not agree, then we'll have to modify the report and our opinion. Any other doubt?
Hi, Teshbita.
Hi, yeah.
Hi, so sorry. I think I might have missed about 30 minutes of the lecture. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible for you to please to
Yeah, I will share the recording. I can't hear you. So I'll share the recording with you, Toyin. Just send me your email address.
Hello, Teshbita.
Yeah, so I can share the recording with you. Just share your email address with me. I'll send the recording there.
Okay, thank you. And the homework as well.
Yeah, right.
Thank
Okay,
you.
guys, then see you. I
Yeah.
hope this session was helpful. See you in the next class, day after.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Take care. Bye bye.